Alex.com, and welcome to my 2020 tutorial on using Google Drive and Google Docs. In this video, I'm going to show you everything that you need to know to get up and running with Google Drive. I do recommend that you follow along in your own Google Drive account, and always remember that you can pause and rewind as needed. Now, to get started with Google Drive, you need to go to google.com/drive or drive.google.com. So you can see that's what's up here on my screen. And from here, we either need to log in with an existing Google account or create a new one. So that's up to you. Let's just click Go to Google Drive. And then from here, I already have an account that I'd like to use. So I'm just going to click to sign in with that account. But again, you could create an account or use a different one if you'd like. So we'll just go ahead and enter our password. Okay, so here we are in Google Drive, and Google Drive at its core is a file storage utility, kind of like Dropbox or Box.com. So we can store any files that we'd like here in Drive. We can store pictures, videos, documents, music files, anything that you'd like. Now you can also create documents within Google Drive, and we're going to look at that as well. But it's important to understand starting out that Google Drive is a file storage utility, and as you upload or create files in Google Drive, they're going to show up here in this main screen. Now you'll notice that we have one file right now, and that's a Getting Started PDF. So this is a PDF that is added to our account by default from Google that kind of gives us some information about how we can use Google Docs. Now we're not going to actually look at that file because we're watching this tutorial, right? But I do want to show you how we can configure our view here in Google Drive to see a little bit more information about each file in our drive. So I'm just going to go up here to the top right, and I'm going to click on this List View button. You'll notice that when I do that, my screen changes a little bit. We still have the same document. It's called Getting Started. We can see that it's a PDF. I'm the owner of it. It was last modified at 326, and it's 1 megabyte file size. So I like this view a little bit better because we can get more details on all of our files. And I could actually click on this file and then go up here to the top right. You'll notice that there's an Info button, and I could see some more information about this file. So we have some details down here below. I could add a description. Just kind of some more information. So that's another view that you can use. Now let's hide this for now. We're going to be working with some different files throughout this video, so we will be coming back to this screen a lot. We'll be going over how we can customize things, how we can move things around, organize documents, all that sort of good stuff. But I think it's easiest when getting started with Google Drive to kind of jump right in. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new document. Now when we create a new document in Drive, we can always do so by going up here to the top left and clicking on this New drop-down. Notice that when I do that, I have the option to create a new folder. I could upload a file. I could upload an entire folder. So if I have a bunch of, say, photos in a folder on my computer, I could upload that whole folder to Google Drive so I have an online backup of it. Now down below, we have a few more options, and this is where we start dealing with Google Docs. So we can create a default Google Doc, which is what we're going to do in a second here. That's like a Word file. We could also create a Google Sheets file, which is like an Excel file. And we could create a Google Slides file, which is like a PowerPoint presentation. Notice that we also have an option for more file types. We can create Google Forms, Google Drawings, Maps, Sites, use Google Jamboard, and we can even connect some more apps. So there are actually third-party developers that are creating apps for Google Drive. So you could click on this Connect More Apps button and you could see the different apps available. But I'm not going to go into the details of that in this video because we're just kind of going over the basics. So to get started, let's go ahead and let's click right on Google Docs to create a new document. Now, when I do that, it's going to open up in a new tab, but I just want to show you that there is an arrow over here, and we could actually create a document from a template. So if you like using templates, you could click on from a template, and you could see the different templates that are offered here in Google Drive, but I tend to create my documents from scratch. So let's just create a blank document. Notice that I said it was going to open up in a new tab, and it did. So we still have access to our Google Drive back here in the other tab. But we now have this document open, and you can see that it looks pretty similar to a Microsoft Word file. Now, one thing that's really nice about Google Drive and Google Docs is that documents are always saved. You don't have to click the Save button. You don't have to worry about your computer crashing. They're always saved, and you can always access different revisions. So if you made a bunch of changes and you don't like the changes you made, it's okay. We can go back and we can access an older version of the document. With that being said, however, naming your document when you first create it is really important, because these documents are going to be saved immediately. You don't want a whole bunch of untitled documents in your Drive list. So the first thing that we want to do anytime we create a document in Google Drive is to go up here to the top and click to rename the document. So we'll just call this test file. And I'm just clicking out of the name, and you'll notice it says saving, and all changes saved to Drive. If I click back over here to my Google Drive tab, you'll see there we have it. We now have a test file in our list. We can see the file type because it's got this little blue symbol over here. And if I look over here in the new dropdown, you'll notice it's the same blue symbol next to Google Docs. If it was a Sheets file, we'd have the green symbol. If it was a Slides file, we'd have this little yellow symbol. So you can see it's right there. But let's go back to our file. And you'll notice, as I mentioned, it looks a lot like a Word file. So, we can just start typing. So we could say, this is some sample text. And then you'll notice that we have all of our formatting options up here across the top. So I could highlight this text. I could change it to a different style if I'd like. So if it was the title of the document, if it was a heading, I can change the font. You'll notice that we have a lot of different font options. You could change the font size, bold, italics, underline. You can change the color here. We could insert links into our document. We can add comments, which I'm going to talk about in a second. We can insert images. We can do all of our alignments, so we could center align this if we wanted to. We can adjust our line spacing. We can create lists, so we could create numbered lists, and you'll notice you have a lot of different options here for that. You can also create bulleted lists, and again, there are some different options for the type of bullets that you'd like to use. And then you can either decrease or increase your indentation. Pretty standard editing tools. Now, I also want to mention that you have all of these drop-downs up here at the top as well, and there are a lot of options in those drop-downs. So, for example, you could go to Format, and you'll notice that we have some of the same options that we had in the menu we just looked at, but there are actually more options here. So this is where we can do our strike through. If we wanted to do something like that, you can modify your headers and footers. You could add page numbers here. In the Tools drop-down, this is where we can get our word count. So that's useful if you need to have a certain amount of words in your document. You can check for spelling and grammar. You can do some voice typing, so you can actually create a document with your voice instead of typing with your hands. A lot of different options here. You can translate documents. So when you are maybe looking for a particular feature here in Google Drive, definitely make sure that you're going through all of these menus if you can't find it, because Google does a pretty good job of making features pretty easily accessible. Okay, so now that we've talked about the different formatting options that we have and we've kind of familiarized ourselves a little bit with Google Drive, let's talk about that commenting feature that I mentioned earlier. So in Google Drive, we can actually do real-time collaboration. So we can work with other people maybe on the other side of the world. We can work in the same document at the same time, and we will see each other's changes in real time. So that's where commenting comes into play, because if I'm collaborating with somebody in a document, we need to add some notes in here and let people know, hey, this needs to be changed, you need to update this. So we can do that with commenting. So if I highlight this text right here, you'll notice that I could click on this Add Comment bubble up here at the top. I could also right-click. I want to mention that because when in doubt in Google Drive, it's always a good idea to right-click as well if you're looking for a particular feature. You'll notice that the one that I'm looking for is right here. It says Comment. So let's just click to comment. You'll notice that when I do that, this little bubble appears on the side. My name is associated with it, letting people know that this is a comment that I'm posting. And I could just say, this needs to be updated. And we'll just hit the comment button. So now you'll notice that there's this comment on the right side of the document. When I click on this text, the comment pops out. This text is highlighted because that's what I highlighted when I made the comment. So if we added some other text on this page, let's also strike through, you'll notice that there isn't a comment associated with this text. It's just this text up here in yellow because, again, I highlighted that text when I created the comment. Now, if there were other users collaborating on this document, they would get an email notification letting them know that I've added a comment. And if they were actually in the document, they would see all of these changes that I've made, and they would also see the comment. You'll notice that at the very top right, there's this A symbol. And this means that I'm currently in the document, and this is the Google account that I'm logged into viewing this document. If there was another user viewing this document with me, they would also appear up here. There would be another icon. It would be, the first letter of their name, and wherever they're located in the document. So if they have certain text highlighted, the text will be highlighted in the same color that their name is. So if somebody was watching my screen right now, they would see my changes in blue because I'm the blue user in this document. Now they could come in here and they could take a look at my comment and they could say, okay, I'm going to make a change, or, it's been updated. So they could say, we've resolved the issue, reply, and then they can click to resolve the comment. And when they resolve the comment, you'll notice that it disappears from our main view. However, if we go up here to this comment section, you'll notice that this button says Open Comment History. You'll notice that we can see the history of our comments. So I initially wrote this needs to be updated, and then I replied that it has been updated, and then I resolved it, which means, it just kind of archived it. It took it away from our main view, so we don't need to deal with it. But I could always reopen this comment if I wanted to. So just because you're resolving a comment doesn't mean that it's not accessible in the future and that you can't reopen it. So let's go ahead and let's close out that. So commenting is a very useful feature for when you're collaborating here in Google Drive. Now, I also want to mention another very useful feature of Google Drive, and that is the version history. So I mentioned earlier that at any time you're working on a document, if you need to recover changes from the past, don't worry, you'll be able to do that. So the way that we access version history is we can go up here to the File dropdown, and you'll notice that there's this option that says Version History. Now, first of all, we could give this version a name. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's name this, let's just say completed document, even though it's obviously not. We'll just hit save. So let's go back to our file menu, go back to version history, and this time we'll click on See Version History. So now another screen opens up, and we can see that right now we're looking at our document, and we're looking at, on the right, you can see the version we're looking at is highlighted in blue. It's the completed document version. Now we also have another version right here, and if I click on that, we'll see, oh, this is just my blank document. This is before I made any changes, so you can see there's a 7-minute difference between these two documents. Now you might say, hey Anson, that's great, there's a cool version history, but it's only got 2 versions. You did other changes in the middle there. Well, we actually have more than 2 versions. If you look up here at this completed document, there's a little drop down. So if I click on this arrow to expand the details, look how many versions we have. We have more than 1 version per minute. So our first version is just when I typed some sample text. You can always see the preview over here to the left. Then, I don't know if I stopped highlighting. I think I changed the text size. Then I centered it. Then I was messing around with some lists, and I added a list, and I got rid of the list. Then we did the strike through, and then we added some more text. So at any point, I could go back and say, you know what, I really liked this version of the document. So I click on this version, and then I can click Restore this version. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that doesn't mean that it goes, oh, back in time to this version and erase all this history. What it will do is it will create a copy of this version, and it will put it at the top of the list. Meaning it's our newest version, we've actually reverted, but we will still have access to all of these other versions. So you really will never lose anything when creating documents here in Google Drive because the version history is so powerful and you can always access previous versions. So don't be concerned about making changes to a document that you're not going to be able to recover from. Version history has you covered. So to exit version history, we're just going to click on this back arrow at the top left. And you'll notice that I didn't restore any older versions, so we're looking at the final version that we created. Okay, so we've talked a lot about some things that we can do within a document here in Google Drive. So let's go ahead and let's just close out this document. I'm just going to close the tab. Boom. Closed out. Now, I mentioned that Google Drive is always saving, so just to prove that, here we are back at Drive. Let's just double-click on this test file, and it will open up again in a new tab, and here is our file. You'll notice that it did save all the changes. I never hit a save button. Okay, if you remember, there isn't a save button because it does it automatically. You can see it says right up here that the last edit was 4 minutes ago, and that every change that you make is automatically saved in Drive. There you go. So I just wanted to show you that to prove that to you. Let's close this tab out, and now let's go ahead and let's just create a Google Sheet file so we can see what that looks like and then how it appears in our file list. So we're going to go back over to the new dropdown, and this time we're going to click on Google Sheets. Again, it opens up in a new tab, and the first thing that we want to do is give the sheet a name, right? So we'll just call this Test Spreadsheet. Okay, now you notice that it looks quite a bit like Excel. We have all of the formatting options that you would expect and that we kind of just went over in Google Docs. Now, one thing that's different is you have your data types. So, when you're working in spreadsheets, you might be using numbers, or you might be using currency, or time, or duration. So there's a whole bunch of different formats that you can use for your numbers in here. So that's really helpful. And then formulas work pretty similarly to how they would in Excel. I'm not going to go over the details of creating formulas in a spreadsheet program. I think that's best for a whole nother video. But if you know how to use Excel, then you shouldn't have any trouble using Google Drive. So let's just take a quick look here. Let's say we have a bunch of revenue numbers. We'll just say like this is how much money our business is bringing in an hour or a day, or I don't know, however successful you want it to be. So let's say we've got these 5 revenue amounts, and we'll just put them in a currency format. That's okay, we'll do euros for now. Now let's say we wanted to find the sum of all of these revenue amounts. All we need to do is click in the cell where we'd like our sum to appear. And to create a simple formula here in Google Sheets, I'm just going to type equals sum, and then I'm going to do an open bracket, and I'm just going to click and drag over the data that I want to sum up, and then click enter. And there you have it. So there's the sum of my 5 numbers. So if one of these were to change, we'll make it a lot higher. It should be over 1,000 now, or close to 1,000. It's bad math. You'll notice that my sum changes as well. So that's how we can do a quick formula here in Google Sheets. You can have multiple sheets in one document. So down here at the bottom, you can see we're using sheet 1. We could add a second sheet. So now there's sheet 2, and they're both accessible from within here. Again, you have all these menus up here. You have some more tools here in Google Sheets than you do in Google Docs. So you can do all of your sorting just like you would in Excel. You can create filters. You can do a whole bunch of pivot tables and all of the things that you would expect to be able to do in a spreadsheet program. You can also do all the commenting, and you can review version history just like you can in Google Docs. So again, I'm not going to go over all the details of using a spreadsheet program, but this should give you a good introduction on how to use Google Sheets. So I'm just going to close out this tab. We know that it was saved automatically, and now we can see it in our file list. You'll notice that it has the different colored icon because this is a spreadsheet, not a regular document. So we have both of our files that we created plus the original file that Google created for us. Okay, so now that we've worked a little bit with some of the documents here in Google Drive, let's talk about organizing and managing our documents a little bit. So first of all, when you create documents, by default, they're just put into this My Drive location, which is basically a giant folder where all of your documents will go. Now, as you use Google Drive, you may want to create some folders to organize your documents better. So let's go ahead and create a folder. We can do that by clicking on the New dropdown, and this time, instead of clicking on one of the document types, we're just going to click on Folder. And we'll just call this Folder 1. You'll notice that when I do that, a folder now appears in our My Drive list, and I could now drag these documents, whoops, I think I have to click over here to the left, drag these documents into the folder. So, there we go. So I've now dragged both of those documents into folder 1. If we double click on folder 1, you'll notice that it opens up so we can see our files. Now at the same time, over here on the left next to My Drive, you'll notice that there's a little drop down arrow. And if we click on that arrow, you'll notice that we can now see folder 1 listed over here on the left as well. So instead of having to go to My Drive and then double click in folder 1, I can just go over here and click directly on folder 1. And here we have our files. Now in a minute, we're going to talk about document sharing. But before I do that, I want to mention that if somebody shares a document with you, it's not automatically going to go to My Drive. It's going to go to this Shared With Me section. Now, I think the reason this is because somebody could essentially spam share you. They could share you like 100 files, and if it just went to My Drive, it would appear in your drive, and it would kind of make things a little messy. So this Shared With Me section is kind of a filter in a way. People can share files with you, and then if you had a file in here, you can just click and you can drag it into My Drive. So then you have easy access to it, or you could drag it into one of the folders that you've created. You can put it wherever you want. But initially, when people share files with you via Google Drive, it's going to go into this Shared With Me section. So make sure you're looking in there. We also have this Recent section, which quite honestly is the main way that I access my files in Google Drive. Usually I have about 50 to 100 documents that are most important to me that I'm using on a regular basis, and I can find them pretty easily by going into the Recent section. There's also this Starred section, so we can actually star files. If we click on a file and then right-click on it, you'll notice that there's an option to add to starred. It's just like starring an email in Gmail. It just puts it in the starred menu. Nothing special other than that. And then you've got the bin, which used to be called trash, but they've renamed it. So when you delete documents, they'll go to the bin, and I believe they will be permanently deleted after 30 days. To delete a document, you could just click on it on the list, You'll notice up here there's a trash icon. Alternatively, we could right-click on a document and we could go to Remove. So there's a couple ways that you can do it. I also want to mention that Google Drive has a search option up here at the top, and it's really powerful. It actually searches text within documents, within the title, within the body of it. So if I'm not using recent, I'm usually searching. I honestly have quite a few folders that I created years ago in Google Drive when it first came out and I was using them. I don't use my folders anymore. I don't put documents in folders, and I don't create new folders. The only time I use folders is when I'm doing some collaboration and we do need to organize things for a project. Okay, now we'll use the folders, but that's more for the other people. If I'm looking for a particular file in that project, I'm probably just going to search for it, or I'm going to go to the recent section. So, just to let you know how my workflow goes, because I think that might be helpful for you as you use Google Drive as well. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's talk about sharing files here in Google Drive. There are a couple ways to do that. I think the easiest is usually to do it when you have a file open, since you're oftentimes going to be working in a file when you share it. So let's go ahead and open up test file. Again, just a double click, opens back up in a new tab. And now to share this file, you'll notice that at the top right corner, there's a big blue share button. So we can go ahead and click on this share button, and then we can go ahead and enter the email address of the person that we'd like to share it with. So I'm just going to share this with webmaster@ansonalex.com. And so you enter the email address. The next thing you need to do is give them sharing permissions. So they can either edit the document, which means they have full permissions to make any changes. Now, don't be too afraid, right? Because you have version history. So if they mess it up, you can always go back, even though it might take some time. Or you can give them permissions where they can view it and add comments, but they can't actually change the body of the document. Or you can give them just view permissions. They can see everything, but they can't change anything and they can't comment. So that's up to you, depending on the situation. You could add a note in here if you wanted to. And by default, it's going to send them an email notifying them that you've shared a document with them. So we could just click on Send. Okay, so we've shared this document. Now, I want to be very clear here. When you share a document in the way that I just did here in Google Drive, we are essentially giving another person access to edit this Google Doc. Okay, I did not share it as a Word file. And if I had done this with our other file, with our spreadsheet file right here, it would share it with that person as a Google Sheet. It would give them access to the Google Sheet. They could edit it if we gave them those permissions, but it is not an Excel file. Now, we can share these as Word files and as Excel files with users who don't use Google Drive, and I am going to show you how to do that. But I just want to be clear, when we talk about sharing in Google Drive, initially, we're just talking about sharing the Google Drive versions, not any other version, okay? So let's go back to our test file here. I want to show you some more details about sharing. So we shared this file, so now when we click on the Share button, we're going to go to another place. So this looks pretty simple, but there is a second section here. We click on Advanced. So when we click on Advanced, we can see all of the details of how this file is shared. So right now, it's shared with only specific people, and that's the email address that I just created it with and the email address that I shared it with. Now from here, I could change the permissions of other users. I could even make somebody else the owner of the file, or I could simply delete their access as well. At the same time, I could also go up here and I could change this overall access. You'll notice that by default, it's only available to those I've shared it with, but if we had a public document, like maybe it was a media kit for our marketing or something, we could make it a public file, and we'll just save that because I want to show you how that works. So we made it public. Now we could give anybody this link up here at the top. We could just copy it to our clipboard and send it via email, and they would be able to access and view the file. They wouldn't be able to make any changes, but they'd be able to view it. So that's only going to come into play in certain situations. Generally speaking, you're only going to want to give specific people access, but I did want to let you know that that feature is available. So this is where we can add more people if we'd like to invite them to collaborate on this file with us, or again, we can delete people. So this is where you can do all of your sharing settings and editing permissions, all that sort of thing. Now let's go ahead and let's close this document out again. I want to mention that we could have done the same thing from this screen. So we've got the file in our list. I could have right-clicked on it and gone to Share, and it brings up the same menu. I can click on Advanced. There you go. Or I could have gone up here to this little silhouette symbol, and I could click on that as well. So again, there's a lot of ways to access different features here in Google Drive. That's how you would share a file. you'll notice that now this file has a little silhouette image to the right of it, meaning that it is a shared file. So we can easily see which files are shared within Google Drive just by that symbol. These other two files are not shared. Okay, so that's great. When we're collaborating on files with other Google Drive users, that's how we can share them, that's how they can edit them. But what do we do if we have a final document that we need to send somebody and they don't use Google Drive? They're a Word person, they just want to open it up in Word and be done with it. Well, we can do that too, and it's actually pretty easy. It's almost easier than sharing it in Drive. So let's say we have this test file. We could do this with either of these files, it doesn't matter. Actually, let's do it with the spreadsheet. I think there's a few other options for the spreadsheet. So let's say we want to share this spreadsheet with somebody who doesn't use Drive. We're going to double click to open up the file. And then with the file open, we're going to go to the File menu. You'll notice that there's an option that says Email as an Attachment. So when we click on that, a new window comes up, and our first option is what format would we like to send the file in. So for a spreadsheet, we can either send it in PDF format or, voila, Microsoft Excel. If this was a regular Google Doc, we'd have the option to send it in Microsoft Word format. So I can choose Excel, enter the email address that I'd like to send it to. I can create a little email in here with a subject and message if I'd like, and I can even send a copy to myself and click send. So now this person has been sent a copy of this file in Excel format. Now I do want to stress that it's a copy, so if they go into that Excel file and make changes, you're not going to see those changes here in Drive. For them to make changes that you would see, they'd have to go into the Google Sheet version of the document, not the Excel version. But they will get a copy, and actually, let's see if that came in. As I sent it to myself. Okay, so here we are in email, and here you have test spreadsheet, and you can see that there is an Excel file attached in this email right here. There's the preview. Perfect, huh? So that's how you can send files to users that don't use Google Drive, and you can send them in the format that they're going to be using it in. Now, just a couple other quick things before we wrap up here. Let's go back to our Drive menu. I want to mention that by default with Google Drive, you have 15 gigabytes of free storage, so you can see how much storage you're using down here at the bottom. If at some point you need to buy storage, you can do that, but quite honestly, if you're using it just for small documents and not big video files, you shouldn't really ever run out of storage. If at some point you want to download a file, you can simply right-click on it and then go to Download. And then you could download a copy of that file to your computer. You would have the same options that you had when you were emailing as an attachment. So you could download it as an Excel file or a PDF in the case of Google Sheets. And then I also want to mention that at any time, if you need to make some changes to your Google Drive account, you can go up here to this gear icon. This is how you can access the Google Drive settings. So you can see here in settings, we have a number of different options. You can kind of go through this on your own if you'd like as well. General settings, you can change notifications. And then down here at the bottom, you can manage apps. So this is, again, I mentioned that there are a lot of different apps available for Google Drive. These are all the default ones that are linked to your account when you create the account. But if you click on the Connect More Apps button up here at the top, you'll notice that we've got a number of different apps available to kind of collaborate with Google Drive and hook up to the Google Drive API. So you can look through this list on your own and see if there's any in here that you already use or that you would like to use. So I hope you found this video helpful. This should be all of the information that you need to get started using Google Drive and creating Google Docs. Remember, whenever you need to create something new, you can just go up here to this new drop-down for folders or for documents. Remember to change to list view if you prefer that when you get started with Google Drive. And everything is saved automatically. You have access to full version history, so don't be afraid to go in, make changes, test things out. You're not going to break anything, and I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I would really appreciate a thumbs up here on YouTube. And if you want to see more technology tips and tutorials, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's all I have for you for today. This is Anson from AnsonAlex.com.